Hello, I'm Tord Nilsson from Market, Dalbello and Völkl in the UK. I'm really excited to be joined from Cape Town in South Africa by adventurer Justin Packshaw. Justin is just days away from heading south to the Antarctica, where he will be leading an unsupported 80-day kite ski expedition across 2,500 miles via polar inaccessibility and the South Pole. Justin, thank you so much for joining me for a quick chat. How are you doing in South Africa?
We're good. Yeah, we are getting fat is our main aim here. No, it's great. It's sort of nice pre. We were told quite last minute we had to quarantine pre going into Antarctica, which is quite right, really. It being a pristine environment. But it's given Jamie and I a bit of time to sort of decompress and really focus on those last minute bits, which there's always so much more than you think. And it's very, very nice here. It's sunny. We're in a place called Langebaan, which is sort of northwest of Cape Town. And so, yeah, fantastic. So we're in good fettle. We're strong, eating well and doing all that stuff, and super keen to get cracking now.
Amazing. I mean, what unbelievable to go and fatten up like the goose before Christmas kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not before the slaughter.
Absolutely. Look, you're an experienced adventurer. You've done loads of successful expeditions all across the world, right? Now, give us a little bit of background why you chose this specific expedition, and kind of why you decided to do it.
Okay, well, my trips in the past, I used to be a soldier, and I've sort of felt very lucky, really, and blessed that I could go off and do these trips. So I've always tried to give something back on the back of them, and that was normally around raising awareness or money for important causes. Various trips we've taken wounded soldiers with us, and I think that sort of the philanthropy is a strange thing, and it's a brilliant thing. And funny enough, the link in with human endeavor is quite a tight one. People get it. But recently I've been thinking about, I'm in my mid-50s, and I've been lucky enough to have gone to the four corners of the world, and I've seen change that we're all talking about. I first went up to the high Arctic 30 years ago, and in those 30 years, it has changed. And so I started thinking that maybe I should be a bit more vocal around airing what I've seen. And obviously, I've some water's gone under my bridge. So I came up with this idea. There are actually 3 trips we're doing. This is the first. And so the idea was to do a trip which was really around science and research. And Antarctica is such an important ecosystem within the whole framework of how Earth sits, in that 90% of the world's fresh water sits in a big ice cube that sits on the top of Antarctica. So that's how it sort of started, and then it sort of bled. I was thinking of just going to the Pole of Inaccessibility, which is right in the middle. It's a fantastic place. I mean, it's right in the middle of the landmass, the furthest point from any coast. And not very many people have been there. And then Jamie hooked Jamie in, who is my partner in crime, who is equally very, very experienced, fantastic chap. And we just thought, well, why don't we just do the full thing, the full crossing? And it sort of went from there. And there's something fabulous about having to be totally supportive of what you have and what you take and each other. I mean, it's a proper old school adventure, this. I mean, people don't really do, or very rarely. I mean, Mike Horn and Borg Olsen did a brilliant trip last year, or the year before last. They crossed the high Arctic. But I mean, it's pretty rare that people do, 60, 70, 80-day trips. And so that's very exciting. And that's how it all sort of unfolded. And the sort of what's worked with this is we've got some amazing stakeholders. I mean, HP are our title sponsor, and I've worked with them for a long time. They're involved in most of my trips, and they're doing some amazing stuff around sustainability. And everything we're trying to do is to showcase excellence around people doing smart stuff to look after the world. And then obviously the research we're doing, both from a psychological perspective and from our sort of physicality, again, is hugely interesting. I think I'm right in saying that Jamie and I are the most highly tested individuals on the planet, or have been for the last 4 months and will be for the next 6 months. So yeah, it's amazing. It's really fun on all levels, actually. Incredible. So rather a long answer to your question, but yes, we've gone from doing things around raising money and awareness to actually trying to bash a drum and hopefully really invigorate and inspire people about the story. And it's not really about Jamie and I, it's just about going and seeing and respecting and hopefully, really opening that whole aspect up to a large audience.
No, I love that. And I love that kind of old school way of doing it as well. It's really kind of harking back to the original kind of adventurers, isn't it? And but then tying in obviously the technology and the research. And on this expedition, you're partnered with like NASA, European Space Agency, I think Stanford University and University of Central Florida. Now, can you explain a little bit about like the key elements of research that you're kind of helping these partners with, and what they're looking? You said you're the most tested individuals. What are you helping them with?
Well, so Antarctica is sort of the perfect petri dish in a funny way, because when you get onto the plateau, it's pristine. So there isn't a living entity. There's no virus, there's no bacteria, there's nothing. So there's the sort of aspect of your human dynamics and how you will cope within a pretty tough environment when you're pushing yourself. So you've got that from the physiological sort of aspect of, what does that do to your body? I mean, Jamie and I are sort of interesting lab rats as such, because obviously I'm in my mid-50s or 57 and Jamie's in his mid-30s. So you've got a really kind of interesting thing about ageism and all of that. We're wearing masses of smart technology, which allows, huge aspects of our body levels to be tested constantly. And then we're giving blood, saliva, poo, and pee weekly. So all of this will be, when it's dissected, will give a huge amount of data as to how our bodies cope. And then the same with the psychological study we're doing. I mean, it's kind of bizarre to put people into a white room, basically. I mean, Antarctica, I've been there a few times. I mean, it is majestically beautiful. But to have it day in, day out, when you have no contrast, so there's no color, there's no trees, there's no, there are psychological aspects which are quite interesting to sort of analyze and look at. And so I think all of that data is going to add some value to human aspects of how you push yourself in various environments. But underpinning it all, it is really all around the next frontier, which is space, is around the corner for us. I mean, we've already had, Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos going into space and other people going into space. I mean, that is going to become much more of a norm. Mm. But the reality is, what does it look like? What does it look like if someone is going to get into a small tin can, and go for 3 months down to Mars? How is that going to play with their mind, et cetera, et cetera? So all of that adds value to having some kind of an understanding as to what the probable answers are to quite tough scenarios. So that's on one side. And then on the other side is the environmental thing. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Antarctica is a very, very important part of our ecosystem. And keeping it stable and settled is an important thing. Obviously, we know there is a big ozone layer above it. And it's very complicated to go into the middle of Antarctica. And obviously, we're going to be doing that in relatively slow time. So it allows us to gather data. So we're gathering for the European Space Agency radiation, UV levels. We're obviously, from looking at just the climate, we're looking at, wind speeds, wind temperatures, ice states, how much snow there is, the density of the snow. And we can do that across the 4,000 plus kilometers that we're doing. And again, that is super useful. And I must say, it's sort of, it's been a really humbling experience working with incredibly bright people from, you know, as you mentioned, from Stanford, from the Mike Snyder lab at Stanford University, all the way through to the European Space Agency and NASA. So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it really is. I just want to, just an odd point you were mentioning about old school explorers.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think it's only just over 100 years ago that people first went to the North, the South Pole and the top of Everest. I mean, that's extraordinary. I mean, you know, we didn't land on the moon until the late 60s. So, yeah. I mean, we are, you know, we're still, when you look at that in context for how long, you know, the world has been around, we're still discovering things. And that, I think, is really, it's fascinating. And it's actually quite humbling, you know, with what we're doing, in that, you know, a handful of people have definitely done this. This isn't the first. But, you know, it's a small handful. And yet we've got people who've been all over the place, you know. And I find that quite encouraging, actually. And I think it's very exciting. It's certainly very exciting to us as a team to know that we're sort of going into areas that people just haven't seen, really.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, here at MDV, we're super excited to be part of it. And I think that part of excitement of going in where kind of almost unknown territory, because it's so different and it's so kind of almost alien to a kind of a normal human being.
Well, you bring up a really important point. I mean, we're unsupported. So both Jamie and I are military, and you know, in these kind of environments, you have to, and it's a sort of candy floss phrase, but it's terribly important. You've got to strive for excellence. So, you know, as an example, our association with MDV has been phenomenal from the get-go. The skis we have, the boots we're taking, and the bindings, obviously, which are connecting the two, are probably, well, they are vitally important to us. And, you know, to ask a pair of ski boots to do over 4,000 clicks of anything is a big ask, let alone the skis, which are going to be thumped around. I mean, we're kiting, our pulse will be, you know, nearly 200 kilograms. So, I mean, we have to strive for the very best kit that is out there. And, you know, I've worked with Dalbello. I've had Dalbello boots pretty much all my ski life. So I know how good they are, but this is a big ask. And I love that. You know, you get, again, bright people who look at problems like this and go, okay, look, I think we need to adapt this. I mean, a massive R&D in science has gone into what we're taking. And, you know, we got the Kendo skis, Völkl skis, and, you know, they're strong, but they're still, you know, it's very, very clever stuff. And we're only taking one extra ski. We're taking one extra ski each as a backup. I mean, weight is everything. We can't, you know, we have two sledges, and we can't, there's only so much we can put in with our fuel and food, etc., etc. And I think that's fantastic. And the same with our bindings, you know, Marker, fantastic company. We're taking the Jester Pros, and you know, clever. It's all been thought through very, very carefully. And then our boots, obviously, Dalbello have developed a specific liner for us, which is about 1 centimeter in total, half a centimeter on each side, thicker. And it's using material which is used on the International Space Station. And, you know, it's been a joy working with them. And you sort of feel already that that's encouraging. You know, all my trips have been man-hauling in the past. And from kiting to man-hauling is obviously it's a different skill set, but your body will react differently because you're not moving so much. I mean, when you're man-hauling, obviously you're creating heat, and you can kind of keep yourself relatively warm. With the kiting, we're going to, you know, there's going to be times when we're going to be in one position for a long time, and so our, you know, extremities, our hands and our feet are we have to keep them warm. And so you know, going in, it's, as I said, it's been fascinating to work with people who've looked at these problems and said, look, we think we've got a workaround on this. And I mean, I really mean this sincerely. I cannot thank everyone at MDV for some fairly significant brain power that has gone into looking at this problem. And we're 3 days out now, and it's very reassuring to know. I mean, it's a big ask what we've got ahead of us, and you never know what will happen. But we couldn't be better prepared with regard to looking at that, striving for excellence on our kit. So very excited about that.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, it's a bit different than just going on a ski holiday, right? You've got to you've got to have that extra padding, and with the Antarctica being, it's obviously a very dangerous place, and you're doing this unsupported. I assume the cold is one of the bigger dangers. What other kind of dangers are you faced with on this trip?
Well, the cold, yeah. I mean, both Jamie's already done a crossing. He did an expedition and did a 1,000-mile crossing 2 years ago, so he's pretty au fait with it as well. And I think the cold, we understand. Extreme cold is just a very bizarre thing, and it's a language you have to learn, really. I mean, if you think your freezer is about -16, our average temperature will be sort of about -30 to -35. Wow. And we can only take so much fuel. So when we're in our tent, I mean, we can't, we're not going to have a super hot tent all the time. But you just get used to how to operate in it. I mean, that's quite, it's a language, as I said. I think the main issue we have is for most of the trip, we will be about 1,000 miles from anyone. And if something goes wrong, if something breaks or we hurt ourselves, obviously there is, that creates a logistical problem. And if we break kit, well, again, you have to be as versatile as you can in fixing stuff and, and be, the planning side of what you take and how you take, how much weight you take, et cetera, et cetera. We've looked at that very carefully. I think the worst thing that can happen really is something happens to one of us. And so we will be, there's no race here. We're just going to, really take it very carefully and gently. We're doing a lot of science on the way, obviously, which means that we have to have time to do that. And I suppose the other sort of variables are always going to be Mother Nature. When she decides to flex her muscles, she's a pretty unruly beast. Yeah. And we just got to be very respectful of that. You've got issues obviously going up onto the plateau. The top of Antarctica is at about 10,000 to 11,000 feet. And going up means that you're obviously going through quite active crevasse fields. So you just have to be careful with that, obviously. So, yeah, but all our high risk assessment has been very detailed, and we will take it all very steadily and cautiously.
I'm sure you will. And also, I mean, you said 2,500 miles. I mean, it's a very long way. You also have elevation built into that. What type of training have you been doing in preparation? How long have you been training for? Just to give people an idea of, you haven't just flown to South Africa to then go for a jolly, have you?
Well, I'm an old knacker, so I've had to train very hard. Jamie just dances around and takes it all in his stride. Look, I think with all these trips, you can't really train enough. That's the truth. I mean, it's going to be a very physical undertaking. And I was a soldier for a long time, so it's in my DNA really to look at that quite carefully. I think that it's your core really. I think, having a good, strong core. So we've done lots of dragging of tires. We were supposed to do this trip last year, actually. And so, but obviously because of COVID, we had to delay. And that's given us an extra year, really, to sort of really, knuckle down and just, put the hard miles in, which we've done. And obviously, the kiting aspect, you want to be, relatively comfortable and good at kiting. And that's what we've done, really. We've just sort of, trained pretty religiously. We've done lots of stuff together. And hopefully you peak at the start line as much of a thoroughbred as is possible in this old creaky body of mine.
Look, you can only do the preparation you can do, right? Look,
Yeah.
that's almost all that we've got time for, and thank you again, Justin. Just before I let you head off, how can people keep up to date with your progress?
So we have the expedition is called Chasing the Light. We have a website which will be up and running on Monday called chasingthelight2021.com. And that we will be feeding into daily. You'll have all our stats. There's a body dash there which has got our pulse rate, sleep levels, etc., etc. There's an environmental dash, and then where our position dash as well. And on Instagram, it's Justin Packshaw. And yeah, so that will be, both of those will be updated as often as possible daily, and hopefully.
Amazing. Well, the best of luck to you and to Jamie. We'll be keeping an eye on your progress. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us.
Well, thank you. And again, thanks very much to all the team at MDV. You're all rock stars. Thank you.
Take care, mate. And good luck.
All right. All the best. Ciao, ciao. Take care.